I would say that there is, in a way, this kind of myth of information overload in a sense. We talk about it as if, doctors and people are just swamped by all this different information. They cannot make their way through it. There are so many different journals and papers, and you can never keep up to date. But in fact, that is manageable. This generic sort of scientific information is codified, it's searchable, you can filter it. What's actually missing, the information underload, I could say, is this local practical information. It's about practice, it's tacit. If it is codified, it's often poorly presented and not very easy to access. People putting out guidelines in PDF online, I can't really manage it very well. And it's not easy to find. And it often doesn't exist in forms that you can actually find it. So that is true for medical education, for education practice, and for medical practice. And so there is obviously a lot of way to go in this, but we still haven't got there, and that's partly because there are all these tensions about these things that we know about. You can talk more about how it is, what is my identity being online, why, what should we be anonymous or not, what are the risks, who's in control, who's got the power over these sort of spaces, who do you trust, what are the issues over access. So these are all points that must be part of why this is not happening more yet. It isn't just about not knowing the technology. If people could always work around it and make it happen, it's because of these cultural sort of issues. And you end up with this kind of balancing act, as we talked about yesterday, about this being open versus closed. If you're open, there is more risk, but you're sharing and learning. Against, you can be safe in your own network and be quite in a private sort of space. And I'm going then to kind of move on to this. This is just a model in a way to kind of help us rethink what we actually mean about this, about identity. And again, I've used this idea of Robert Keegan's about a constructive developmental approach to transformative learning. And this is about the kind of ways that we know, what are our personal kind of epistemologies and way of being. And he talks about the socialized mind, the self-authoring mind, and the self-transforming mind. Now I'm going to sort of suggest that if we're talking about professional identity, I'm socialized into an identity about being a doctor. Whenever I'm being a doctor, to a certain extent, I am meeting the guidelines, the institutions, the GMC, what other bodies, what my colleagues actually think. So people, you can be socialized and be meeting the expectations of other external bodies or people to you. Then there's also self-authoring. You've taken in the values yourself. You've decided your own values, and that's what actually influences your identity and how you practice. And then this notion actually of being able to step outside that, be able to view it from the outside and see the different viewpoints, be reflexive and consider other people's point of view. And in a way, I'll say, that this is in a way an aim, I would say, that we have in general medicine. We expect doctors to be able to take on board the view of their patients and be reflexive and not come in just with, these are the rules and this is what we do, or these are my rules, but actually I'm working with you. So how is this then related to social media? Well, it's also needed in the sense that there aren't rules out there. This is about this talk about the Facebook is the Wild West from a Harvard health expert was a study looking at patient communities online. There are no rules there yet. This is a kind of new frontier. We can't rely on being socialized into these spaces to know how to be and how to behave, because there aren't enough people sort of there and we haven't figured it out yet. And instead, you're either depending on the own internalized values that you have taken from other places, and you're probably also being exposed to other ways of considering what your identity is. And I'm going to tell you about this little story just as a way of illustrating this. So although if you go and you look at my Twitter profile, you'll see that I've made nearly up on 40,000 tweets over the last 3 years or so. I don't think that it's not my mind that most of the time I'm projecting myself as a doctor, even though I have GP as the first word of my Twitter bio. And I very rarely get approached, I would say, just as being a doctor or being asked sort of for advice. But on this occasion, a few months ago, somebody said to me, could they ask me a quick question about a definition of something medical? Now, I didn't know this person. It wasn't somebody I was following. And I sort of thought, well, how do I respond to this? Well, it's about definition, this is about information. If a medical student, I'm involved in these chats, if somebody asks me something, I'd respond to it. So of course I'll I'll kind of, I'll respond to this. So I said, well, yeah, go ahead. I'm, pretty good by definitions. I can cope with that. And the response then was, well, can you tell me what distant metastases mean? Now, if you know anything, this is about advanced cancer. So we're moved away from just a simple kind of thing of give me the information towards this is a situation where obviously somebody has, for some reason, asking quite an emotional person sort of question. So I asked the person's permission, and I have blogged about this interaction, and so you can see more about the story. I don't have time to go into it all now, but this made me kind of step back and think, well, why am I? What is this? What does this tell me about my identity as being a professional in this space? So going back to this idea of being socialised, I blogged about it, and somebody from the US responded, and they said, you need to check with your licensing body. Was that entering into a doctor-patient relationship? So there, the idea about how to be there was from a socialised point of view. What were the rules? People sort of saying, why have the GMC not told us yet about how to be in social media? Lots of people issuing guidelines about how medical students and doctors and people should present themselves and be within social media and these other public spaces that we've not really had a need for this before. I was approaching it more from my kind of self-authoring point of view, my values. To me, being a doctor with a patient was about relationship and service. And I didn't feel I had that with that person. For me, this wasn't really about a doctor-patient relationship. This was about me giving some information to somebody I met online. But by blogging about it, by thinking about it, and realising that actually, if you can step back, why was that happening? Why was somebody coming and asking me who they didn't know about what distant metastases meant? What conversations were not happening? What about what I tell myself about my profession and that we actually say we give people and we communicate and whatever? Social media forces you to realise that all the stories that we tell ourselves are not actually all true. There is a different world out there, and you see this whenever you start looking at our discussions about medical education. We can be very cosy in our own spaces, talking within these rooms and whatever, with all the people who kind of more or less sometimes think the same way as us and are coming from the same perspectives. But once you go out and you move into this, you have to be able and prepared to be self-transforming, to be engaged and take on other people's viewpoints. And so I'm just going to sort of nearly finish up with this idea of this came from a Norwegian medical student, and this was at this conference last week, and she said to be the doctor, to be a professional is to be who the patient needs you to be. Now, it wasn't about what your organisation tells you. It's not even about what you think, but you must tie that in with who the patient needs you to be. And as we move forwards, we're going to have to take on board that our values may not be in step with some of the people that we're working with. We have made the decisions about privacy and what people give away. How are we going to do whenever people say, I want to have a conversation with you in public? What about where do I actually come in then? Well, do I want to be a practitioner in public? I am pretty clear at the moment that I don't feel comfortable with that, but how will I take on board and actually deal with those situations? And the other thing is that as an educator, I actually asked one of my own students, asked privately on Twitter, what do you think my presence on Twitter tells you about me as an educator, a learner, as a doctor? And this is what she said. I hope. Sorry, clicking in the wrong place. She said this. So my identity, what she learned about me and those things, was not the links that I shared. It wasn't a viewpoint. It wasn't information. It wasn't it was about what she saw was about interactions, about how I conducted myself with other kind of viewpoints, how I took on. That's what I was modelling to her. It was about this giving her an idea about how to relate to other people online, perhaps. She didn't say she would actually follow it, but I imagine that in a way, as an educator, that's what I really was managing, hopefully, to do, to be modelling other ways of being. So just finish up with this idea again, that we talk too often, I think, about digital identity and professionalism and professional digital identity as this bits of information that are actually coming together, but it's not that. People view me and make their mind up on me. And the important people, the people who I actually am working with, as an educator, or possibly also if they come online, my patients and people will, it won't be about these little random bits of information, but it'll be about how I interact and how I am through my relationships, my relational kind of identity. So that's all I want to say. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. That was great. Question time now. Can you raise your hands if you have some questions, but then please wait until the microphone comes round before speaking so we can capture it for the online presentation.
Thanks very much. I really enjoyed your presentation, and I think it's an important topic, and I wonder if it reminds me of Irving Goffman's work.
Yes.
In terms of performing yourself, and I wonder if I'd like to hear your comments on the sort of skillful use of different identities in these contexts. I suspect that professionalism sometimes has to do with how well you move between identities rather than the individual identities themselves as much, and perhaps that this is even more relevant now that we've got these social media.
Yeah, I think that I suppose my view is that it nearly is moving on to being. I don't have not a lot of kind of, I keep things like my Facebook sort of profile and everything quite close down, my holiday pictures, but actually it could be public, it wouldn't really matter. But I think what we're moving in a sense into, and I haven't really talked that much about here, how much, what is it, sometimes when we talk about being professional, it's about us as being like a blank canvas for other people to project their kind of ideas onto, that we don't want to give away sort of too much because we have this notion that it actually will distract from their experience. People are considering you then, who you are, and how are you going to respond to me because of this, rather than some of your values or whatever, rather than what I need you to be. So I can't project this on so well. And I don't think that, I kind of sort of say that sometimes I'm too busy. Got so many things going on. I don't actually really have that much time to be unprofessional. Actually, there's not that much. But at the same time, I don't share, don't tweet things all the time that are like really. But I will say if I'm like sort of seeing some music and it's very good, I don't mind. I don't worry that that's going to influence people too much about me. I don't think that. My mind has moved on to thinking that that's not, people will view me more, the important people, in a kind of totality rather than these just isolated bits. But maybe I'm over optimistic about that.
Thank you. There's a question just here, but as the microphone moves round, can we take one online? It's a fairly general question, Anne-Marie.
Oh, is it?
What are the implications of being a public general practitioner?
Oh, this actually came from that gentleman over there.
Oh, wow. You could have asked the question.
True-minded. Do you want to add anything to it?
Wait for the microphone, please.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. And that was a refreshing presentation, actually. It made us all think, I believe, about issues of identity and so on. But the reason I asked that question is because I know a lot of other practitioners in other fields, like in law, for instance, who are doing a very similar thing to this. Firstly, the question is, do you think there's going to be an increase in this kind of public performance of your profession? And secondly, if that's the case, what do we do about things like authenticity? Somebody might masquerade as a doctor or a lawyer and not actually be one, and they might be giving dangerous advice.
Yes. Well, I suppose that I was actually, what I was trying to say is I am not prepared to move into this space and practice as a professional, as a GP. That is not at all my kind of what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that you cannot have an absolute that, anybody comes and asks me anything medical, I will say, sorry, excuse me, I cannot respond to that, because doesn't fit with me also being like an educator and being somebody that wants to share knowledge. But I don't believe that just giving a simple piece of information like that, a very transactional thing, to me, that's not being a doctor. That's not being a GP. Because if I was a GP in that situation, or even if I met somebody here, and somebody said this, and I would say, well, gosh, what, that sounds awful. Why is that, or what's happening, or whatever, and we would have a very different conversation to me just saying, oh yes, it means that it's spread through the blood or the lymphatic sort of channels, and then they said, oh, well, it's about a friend, and they don't know about this and whatever, and all I was sort of saying about that sounds very distressing. But I didn't get into a big dialogue about it. I was not being a doctor in that situation. And I don't think that I don't feel happy or comfortable sort of going on, although in being in that public way, but as I'm saying, we might be challenged about how do we, if other people start coming forwards, how much then do we actually be reflexive and respond to what other people decide? How do we assess that actually you understand what you're doing and that you're confidential? How do you understand that? Do I have a greater, that even if you think that you want to share everything in public, do I want to be seen as how I practice in public? Do I have rights about this as well? So I wouldn't advocate it by any sort of thing. And I think I wanted to talk though more about how you actually can, what are the issues if these things come up and you haven't set out for them to be there.
We had a question over here.
Hello? Yes. One of the conundrums in medical education is that often the context of learning and the learning methods move ahead, and the mirroring assessments that we apply to students don't change. Mm-hmm. This will probably apply to medical practitioners in terms of the presence that you've been talking about. What guidelines or what processes could be gone through for your college law builders in terms of what you might be suitable for or not, or what will be acceptable practice? How can we fast track that process or update their concepts of what's acceptable and not?
Well, I think that this is an important, although I'm sort of talking about getting out there and being reflexive and taking on it, if you're there, you will, by necessity, if you keep conducting yourself just as being, I kind of know what I'm doing. First of all, we don't have the rules, and it's not kind of clear. So you have to, before you even decide to go there, you maybe need to be experienced. You need to be, because it is not I am meeting students there and I'm supporting them and mentoring them if I come across them, but I am not encouraging my students to go out and start having a public profile. I am not sure that it is a safe place to, to learn to be. But it also falls into, like yesterday in the discussion about how students have, or within the VLE and within safe spaces we give, they project maybe like an institutional socialised kind of identity, and then you come across them in other spaces and they're in a way different. So there are some people that are out there exploring what does it feel like to be talking in a public way about this, and becoming more confident of their identity. And I'm talking to sometimes I take on this mentoring role for people across the UK. A medical student might say, I'm thinking about writing a blog post, somebody from, I don't know, Leicester or whatever, I'm thinking about writing a blog post about this. Do you think this is okay? And I said, well, have you thought, would that person be able to recognise who you from that? Maybe you should change this. So in a way, my role as being an ed is no longer just even to people within my own institution, but if I'm there as an educator in that public space, I'm having a role that's sort of much more far-reaching. I think that we can. There aren't to me simple sort of rules about this, but the things that have come out so far tend to be sort of saying, it is watch out, be careful, which I think is right to a certain extent. And maybe we could give people chances to come in and have these sort of discussions about sort of topics. I'm trying to be quite careful about the things that we select for these chat sessions. Now, we have approached some difficult things, but some people, can we talk about difficult patients? And I was like, well, I don't really feel that we have difficult patients with difficult consultations. Maybe I'm a difficult doctor some days, and I think that would be too complex a thing to talk about in 140 characters. That would give people a chance to maybe appear unprofessional. This is too complicated for a discussion within there. So you have to be careful about the things. So it's much easier to talk about how to use technology in lecture theatre than something like that.
Can you wait for Mike so we can capture?
So is there actually a proper definition for digital professionalism
There's
yet?
been some really good, interesting work done by Rachel Ellaway on this about digital professionalism, and it's came, and actually it's very this was published about a year or so ago in Medical Teacher, and I had actually copied because that's a paid-for journal. I'd taken out her sort of simple rules, some of the rules, and put them in a blog post. So if you actually want to see, they're kind of public there. And I was saying, this is, although you come up with these rules, it's not easy. And I think we're going to try and run a series in our kind of med-ed chat sessions with students and people, and actually talk about what do these rules actually mean to us. How do we develop amongst a group of people an idea about what these sort of ideas are? What does it mean to say you should have a professional kind of presence? What does that mean? So we're going to try and hopefully tease that out. So we'd love if people join in, look at my blog, and you'll find more about it, hopefully.
Thank you. On that note, Anne-Marie, we're going to have to draw it to a halt. So
Thank you.
Thank you for a great session.